Why don't atheists find the historical evidence of the resurrection convincing? Imagine a typical atheist and Christian arguing with each other. It might look like this. Look at all the evidence we have. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, died on the cross, empty tomb 3 days later. His apostles first ran away, then preached the gospel and died. That single carpenter established a church that took over the Roman Empire and is now the largest religion in the world. How can you not believe that Jesus is God? That's a cool story, bro, but dead people don't come back to life. There is simply no evidence of that. Why is the Christian convinced but the atheist is not? How can two people agree with the historical evidence but come to two different conclusions? Here's a thought experiment. Assume that a follower of Zeus tried to convince you that Zeus is God. He presented you with the exact same evidence, which for the purpose of the demonstration is just as historically reliable. Would you find Zeus convincing, despite the evidence being the same? And if not, why not? That's more or less how the materialist atheists view the resurrection when you bring it up. Atheists don't find the historical evidence convincing because if miracles are impossible, then any resurrection evidence is framed to be impossible by their worldview. That's why you wouldn't ever believe me if I told you that I saw a square circle, because your worldview would tell you that it's impossible. Similarly, you would find any evidence of a resurrecting Zeus as inherently unreliable, because Zeus is one of the many imperfect gods which can't exist given the Christian worldview. That's why it's crucial to get into the other person's shoes and look at the argument with their eyes. However, when looking through someone else's eyes, it's not only their worldview that you have to keep in mind, it's also their personal bias, which leads me to my next question. Why are so many atheists so dismissive of Christianity given its impact? Just to be clear, I know it's not true of all atheists. However, if there really was a historical Zeus, with the same history and impact as Jesus, I wouldn't believe him to have resurrected, but I would definitely want to find out more. Unless you have zero interest in history, why wouldn't you be interested in a single carpenter starting a movement that would take over the Roman Empire and have over 2 billion current followers? The driving factor for being dismissive can't be just about the reliability of the evidence. I think that some people just don't want Christianity to be true so strongly that they will throw the baby out with the bathwater. The truth is that we like to act as if we are objective about everything, but we are not. We all have our biases. Similarly, how many of us Christians like to use the historical evidence without ever checking its authenticity, just because it supports our worldview? Isn't that something we accuse the believers of other religions of doing? Sometimes it's okay just to say you believe it but you never checked it, without acting like you did. But putting our biases aside, let's move on to the heart of the issue. Can we ever discuss the historical evidence of the resurrection with someone who has a different interpretive worldview? First of all, let's acknowledge that atheism is not a religion, it's just a lack of belief in God. However, the atheists do have some form of a worldview, such as materialism. All a worldview is the way you view the world. That's it. Everyone has one. So it's a two-way problem. It seems as if we could either abandon the historical argument and start a discussion about the possibility of miracles, or you could wipe the dust from your sandals and move on. But if we have to narrow down only talking about our worldviews, why do we have the historical argument in the first place? Shouldn't we all just become philosophers? And if you can't convince anybody with the argument for the resurrection, why do you believe it yourself? This problem touches upon a very important topic. How do you build your worldview? Many people seem to have the false impression that with a single argument you can convert your opponent, or that your own worldview could crumble. Any sophisticated worldview has many legs to stand on. There is no single argument that can prove everything your worldview has to offer, but they're not meant to. The philosophical arguments for God's existence can only take you so far. They can't prove that Christianity is true, but they're not meant to. They are only meant to prove that God exists, not which religion is the correct one. Likewise, you will almost never convince a materialist atheist that God exists based on the historical evidence, with rare exceptions. But you're not meant to. The historical evidence for Jesus' resurrection is mostly useful for people that are already open to the possibility or already believe in God, but are not Christian. And if you're an atheist, don't bother saying that the philosophical arguments don't prove Christianity or that the historical evidence doesn't prove God exists. If you're a Christian, you will waste your time trying to forcibly convert an atheist with historical evidence they don't believe is possible. That time would be better spent talking about the heart of the issue, your worldviews, or even better, being a good example to others. And if you're an atheist, think about any arguments the Christian says in context of all the other beliefs they hold, including philosophy, history, ethics, practical effects, and individual experiences. Many of us tend to build our worldview on a rock. You're not going to move it as easily as you think. So what's my final advice? Whether you're a Christian or an atheist, recognize your worldview differences and keep the arguments with their intended purpose in mind. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments. And if you like this kind of video, please consider subscribing to my channel, as that will help me to make more videos.